Welcome everyone to today's session. Hopefully it will be helpful. I really encourage you to ask the questions as mentioned before. I'd love my success criteria here is that everyone does have some time, or if they have any questions they'd like to have answered, that we have the appropriate amount of time to do that. I will be covering kind of content from a more non-technical perspective. So today, hopefully we'll focus more on business strategy and really hoping to bridge that gap between where AI and strategy fits and business strategy. And hopefully this will then arm you to have conversations internally or to ask questions of us, again, in a non-technical capacity. Of course, if there's technical questions, I can take a stab at answering those as well. But the goal for today is to keep it at a business level conversation. So that being said, my name is Jamie. We will be talking about AI strategy. So I am the CTO here at ProServeIT. And not a commercial, just a little bit about who we are, right? These are our values. I think every company probably has a value slide. But our slogan here, this unlock your digital future, I really want to hone in on this for this context, because I think with what's going on today, with where technology is, with how fast everything is moving, every business actually has an opportunity. It's our belief that every business has an opportunity to become a technology company. And that's not to say that you're going to all of a sudden change how you go to market, how you add value to your customers, how you monetize your offerings. However, thinking about technology and what it can help you do to enhance some of those other things, I think it's at a place now where it has the possibility to do that in ways that things that you just haven't been able to do prior to today. So what's changed? Generative AI. Has anyone heard of that before? Anyone heard of OpenAI or Copilot or insert other AI tool here? Yeah, AI is a thing. And if you listen to the news, it's everywhere. Every SaaS company, every software vendor that you're working with likely has an AI strategy in some capacity. Even if they don't have an AI strategy, I suspect that they'll have AI on their webpage. And it's just become such a monumental thing. It's a shift that from precedent perspective, there's really not a lot like this, right? When we think back to the internet or other types of disruptive technologies that really were brought into the market, the pace and the types of conversations that AI is creating are really different. And why? Why is it different? Why is it such a big deal? And this isn't a slide to, and I promise we're not going to do too much into education on AI. We've probably all had a ton of content and webinars for that, but just to set the stage, right? AI as a technology, when we think of AI, really it's ChatGPT that started this whole momentum, almost coming up on 2 years now, in that November of 2022, when it really hit mainstream, opened it up to the market. But in that time frame, a lot of software companies have this metric over how long it took them to reach 1 million users. And you can see up there, we've got people like Netflix and Facebook and Spotify and all these other platforms. And ChatGPT did this in 5 days. And that's not to say that because they did this in 5 days that you need to pivot your business strategy, that you need to drop everything that you're doing and go pay attention to AI. Rather, it's to say this is actually a pretty transformative time. I'll try not to overuse that word, but this is a time unlike any other in the sense where this tech is coming and it is going to disrupt business. And I don't think it's a question of if, I think it's a question of when and how, right? And hopefully I don't know if I'll be able to answer both of those questions for you today, but that's what I'd love for us to think about, is understanding that AI is here or it's coming, again, depending on your perspective. And given that perspective, what does my business need to do to prepare or to think about it? Again, as we're going, feel free to ask any questions. Happy to take the time to answer them. All right, so when we talk about technology, we talk about AI, I find it's very easy to go right into the details, to go right into the bits and bytes and the ones and zeros. And I think that's really what makes talking about technology challenging and intimidating, perhaps, to non-tech people, right? To a normal, whatever that means, a normal business audience, that can become an intimidating conversation. And we find that using analogies or metaphors really helps create a less intimidating venue to have that conversation. And so for us, when we look at businesses, when we look at the companies that we work with, we use a metaphor of a house, i.e., we look at the technology imprint or the technology landscape of your business through the lens of a house or through the metaphor of a house. And like any house, the foundation is critically important. And to us, that foundation is security. If it's not secure, it's not worth doing. And that just needs to be the pillars upon which you put all of the rest of the investments in your business. On top of that foundation, there's 4 core rooms. The first room is infrastructure. And infrastructure is really all of the stuff that you could probably think of as what IT was 10 years ago. It's all the blinky lights in your server room, it's your network, it's your Wi-Fi, it's your devices. It's all the stuff that's still critically important for you to run your business, but probably no longer encapsulates what your total technology investment. Beside that, we have our departmental applications. And these are really the applications that are functional in nature, right? So these might be your CRM for your sales team, your finance package for your accounting team, could be your operations system or your HRIS for your HR team. Whatever that is, there's probably some tools that you're using that are functional in nature, and we think of those as departmental applications. Next, we have our brand experience. And brand experience is really those tools that is how both your customers and your employees view your business through the lens of technology. So internally to employees, right, what is those pieces of technology that you're going to invest in intentionally to help attract, retain, and grow employees, right? Ergo, your employee experience. Similarly, from a customer lens, what are those pieces of technology that you're going to invest in that's going to help you attract, retain, and grow customer experience? So those two lenses, the employee and customer experience together, create that brand experience for your business, again, from a technology perspective. Final room of the house is productivity. It's all of those tools that we use day in and day out: email, Word, Teams, Excel, spreadsheets, all of the stuff that we probably spend far too much time living in and day out, but really we probably couldn't imagine working without those tools, right? And because of that, because of such a critical role those tools play in how we get work done, for us, they deserve their own room for us to think about the impact to the business. Now, on top of those 4 rooms, we have a horizontal room, and the next horizontal room on top of security, and that's the core business application. So it's been our experience that most businesses, and again, depending on how large your business is, this could be your department or geography, but most businesses or business units has one application that tends to be more important than all the rest. This could be an ERP, this could be a donation management system if you're a not-for-profit, but whatever it is, I suspect that many of you could point to an application and say, yep, that's our core business application. This is how we run our business. This is how we monetize things. This is how we do whatever it is that's critical to our organization. And because it's so critical and because it plays such an integral role, for us, it deserves its own room, for us to contemplate how we invest in that technology and how we invest in that application, and even how we measure success for that application. And finally, the final room of the house at the top is insights and automation. So it's recognizing that everything below the roof creates data. And it's up to us as business leaders to look at that data and say, how can I use that data to make better decisions? How can I use that data to look for ways to optimize our workflow or create automation? So all that together, for us, again, creates that view of the house. And it allows us to use metaphors like construction metaphors, things like, we're going to renovate our kitchen. And while we renovate our kitchen, where are we going to eat? Are we going to barbecue? Where are we going to put our plates and our dishes and our cutlery, etc., in the interim period? And we can probably create similarities to that to things like an ERP change or an application upgrade. We need to go through those similar considerations for, do we run the systems in parallel? How are we going to move the data, etc., etc.? So hopefully that house metaphor creates some, or removes that intimidation factor, let's say, when talking about technology. So if I back things up all the way, where we joined to talk about today is AI. And if we look at this from a metaphor perspective, where does AI fit, right? Is AI its own room? Is AI around everything? Or how does AI impact this? And if I were to ask this audience here, right? How many of your businesses actually has an AI challenge that they need to solve? If you're to think about that for a second, I suspect that many of you would say, I don't have an AI problem, right? I probably have a productivity challenge or opportunity. I have a brand experience opportunity. I could hire more people. I could retain our team. I could find more customers, right? These are the typical challenges and opportunities that exist. And what AI does really is it allows us to look for opportunities to be more productive, right? It allows us to think about being more secure. It allows us to perhaps look at data and automation in a better way to expand our capability there, et cetera, et cetera. So AI isn't its own room. It shouldn't be something that we should be pursuing in and of itself. Likely, AI is something that will create an opportunity to enhance or augment an opportunity or challenge that already exists in the business, or to perhaps even take on opportunities that we felt were out of reach before because the technology wasn't there. And I'll pause for a second as I have a quick drink of water. If there's any questions, again, feel free to pop them in. Would love to answer them. Albert, yes, you will be getting the recording. I think Hyunjin will probably be shared via email. I'm not sure in what capacity. She can probably speak to that at the end of the session. And I don't know if we don't typically share the deck, but if that's something that would be helpful, feel free to reach out to us and we can figure that out. We don't think of anything here as obviously, we put a lot of effort into creating this IP, but it's not necessarily something that we're trying to gatekeep. All right, fit for purpose AI. What does this mean? Again, technology and IT people or technology people are really good at going and trying to having some really cool tool and saying, hey, I've got this really cool tool. I'm going to go find some problems to solve with this tool. And that's probably not the way that we want to think through any investment we make as a business. We probably want to start with a problem first and then figure out the best way to solve it. And that's true with AI to an extent, right? I still think there's opportunity, or we want to make sure that we are aware of what's going on and how these trends are going to impact our business. But what we want to do is figure out, we don't want AI for the sake of AI. We want AI, or AI needs to fit a purpose. And so what do those mean? I'm going to go through a couple of consumer examples, so stuff that probably is more prevalent in your home world. And then I'm going to pivot that to talk about how to think about that through a business lens. Okay, and to start, we're going to look at Brew. So Brew is an actual AI avatar. This person may or may not look deceptively like a famous quarterback that once played football, and in fact it is. But Brew has a Facebook profile, he has an Instagram profile, and idea is that when you're watching a sports game, typically it's more fun when you're watching it with friends. You can talk about the game, you can commentate on stuff, you can have opinions, and Brew, through this AI avatar, allows you to have a debate or comment on sports so that you're not alone, right? Or if you're just looking for someone to tie break an opinion on some stat, again, you can message Brew and they'll respond. And it's an AI, it's not an actual person. But if you go to their Facebook profile, they're posting. So if football's not your thing or sport's not your thing, what about dancing? You can go talk with Coco, who's, I believe, Charlie D'Amelio. If that's not your thing, what about Dungeons and Dragons? You can have Snoop Dogg be your dungeon master. And for those that are not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, the role of the dungeon master is effectively the narrator of the story. They're the ones that say, your group has walked into a cave, you see a dragon at the end of the hall, what do you do? And that's up to you as the players or the participants in the story to say, I cast my spell, I run away, I do whatever. So why am I sharing these things? Why do I have Snoop Dogg as a dungeon master and Tom Brady as Brew up on a slide? And what I would love you to think about is, what's the difference? What's the difference between the dungeon master and Brew? The main difference is the data, right? Brew needs to know touchdowns, field goals, penalties, whatever that person needs to understand about football or sports. That's the vocabulary and knowledge that Brew needs to have. Whereas the dungeon master needs to understand casting spells and dragons and rolling the dice and again, whatever else is relevant for Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games. And so at the heart of it, it's really the data, because the way you interact with both of these, and they're serving vastly different use cases here, right? Narrating a role-playing game, debating sports. It's just the data that differentiates it. So I'd love for you to think about inside of your business, what data do you have that is unique to your organization, right? What competitive advantage might your data provide your business if you had a way to activate it, or if you had a way to do things with it that you're unable to or haven't contemplated to date? So let's pivot, like I mentioned. Let's look at Billy here. So let's imagine, and I'll be using some Microsoft vernacular here, but this could apply to Google or any other tools, but just for the sake of this, I've been using the Microsoft vernacular. Hopefully that's okay. But let's look at Billy here. And rather than Billy being your ride or die older sister, whom I've actually not spoken to, that digital avatar, I'm curious what you actually talk about there. But what if Billy instead was your sales co-pilot, right? And what does that mean? So let's do a little bit of a role play here, or a scenario, paint a picture. So let's say I'm just about to jump on a call with a prospective customer. I jump on the call, I've got this prospect on the line, we immediately hit it off, we're talking, we've got good rapport, we aligned from a culture and from a values perspective, that we feel that we're people that we can work with quite effectively. We get discussing, and it turns out that Billy, or sorry, the customer that we're speaking to, the prospect, has a distinct challenge in their business that our solution directly solves for. It turns out that prospect has a decision that they're looking to make in the next week or two. They've got budget assigned. And not only that, it turns out that the person that I'm speaking with is the actual decision maker. They're the one that's going to be deciding what the solution is that their business is going to look at to solve their problems. So I get off the call and I'm excited. I'm like, wow, that was the best prospective sales call ever, right? We've got budget, authority, need, timeline, great rapport, culture and value alignment. It's the perfect opportunity. So now, normally you go, wow, I just got a bunch of work I need to do. But what if instead you go, hey, Billy, can you summarize that call that we were just on and itemize any action items that we agreed to on that call? And can you draft that email and put it in my outbox for me to review? Once you're done with that, can you build a sales proposal for that prospective customer based on the last proposal that we built? But I'd like you to make sure that all of the content, the pricing, the details, quotas, the numbers, all of the specifics of that proposal are relevant based off of the calls and the details that we discussed with the customer. Once that's done, can you take that sales proposal, submit it through our sales proposal review process for my manager to review? Once my manager has reviewed and approved that proposal, can you attach that proposal to the email and send it to that customer with that email that we've drafted? Once you're done that, can you then go into CRM, update all of the records relative to the call that we just had, make sure that the budget is appropriate, that we have a good idea over the timeline when the deal is going to close, all of the specifics down to whether that prospect likes chocolate or not. We make sure all of those details are captured inside of CRM. Thank you very much. That was 20 seconds, right? But if we think about that from a business perspective, conservatively, how much time would that save? 1 hour, 5 hours, 20 hours, right? It probably depends business to business, but I would hazard a guess there's no business on the phone here that wouldn't represent at least multiple hours of saving. And I get it, right? Is that a pipe dream, or how realistic is what I just described that scenario? And I'll say for us, like me personally, I've done everything up until the CRM, update the CRM for me automatically. And it's not that I can't, we just haven't done that, right? And if we felt that was high value enough, we probably would. We would configure it to go and make those updates for us. So this is stuff that's actually ready and available, and you can go and take advantage of now from a business perspective. All right, so that's a sales use case. Let's change the scenario a little bit. And so what about, rather than looking from a sales co-pilot perspective, what if Zach here instead was our service co-pilot? and I'll ask a rhetorical question of everyone here on the phone or on our Teams meeting, right? How many of us, and I want you to think about this, when was the last time that you called into a help desk, right? Whether that's Rogers or TELUS or maybe your business's IT help desk, whatever. Think about that. And I would like you to either agree or disagree. That was the best day of your life. You had an amazing experience on that call and you can't wait to call that help desk back. Anybody? I suspect nobody, right? So what if the experience was like this? So I'm Jamie, I'm going to be calling, or I'm going to have, maybe Hyun Jin's going to be calling into me for support. So Hyun Jin's going to call in. That's going to be, hey, Hyun Jin, how are you doing? And Zach recognizes that it's Hyun Jin calling in. And she says, oh, she likes chocolate. Why don't you ask her about if she's had any really great places she can recommend lately, right? And so I ask that, and we just have a little bit of a human conversation before we get into the nitty gritty. And I say, great. All right, Hyun Jin, how can I help? And she says, hey, I'm at the Mississauga office. My printer's not working. And so I go, oh, okay, great. Let me look into that. So while I look into that, Zach in the background goes, hey, Jamie, it turns out, so I recognize that Hyun Jin's in the Mississauga office. We've actually seen that there's 2 other users that had similar issues to what Hyun Jin is describing on the last 2 Thursdays consecutively. And here is the solution that got these 2 people back up and running quickly. So I go, oh, great, thanks, Zach. I said, Hyun Jin, I think I know the issue. We're going to go and do this, right? And we go and we execute the fix. She's ecstatic. We've had a very quick, polite, happy conversation. We resolved her issue immediately, and she's back and being productive again. So I get off that call. I say, thank you, Zach. That was super helpful. And Zach goes, no problem. But I recognize there's a pattern here, right? I think, Zach's going to tell me, I think we should open up another ticket. And here's what I think we need to do so that we can get to the root cause analysis and avoid anyone else from having to call in for this issue again in the future. I say, great, Zach, that's an amazing idea. Go ahead and do that. Open up that ticket and execute whatever it is that you suggested to get to the root cause of that. So I'm super happy. And I say, okay, great. Now, Zach, can you update the ticket for me, the incident management ticket, capture all the details of the ticket, any of the recommendations that we captured, and can you go and make sure my timesheets are up to date, everything that's going to be required to record that interaction. Once you've done that, can you then go into our configuration management database and make sure any relevant changes that were done are reflected in the configuration database? Like maybe we changed the printer or some settings or whatever. Can we just make sure that those, whatever changes were done, are documented, captured, cataloged appropriately, right? And so in that scenario, again, I think we could all agree that would likely lead to a better interaction from a service desk or a support experience perspective. But if we compare that Zach scenario to Billy, the Billy scenario is almost like an automation engine, right? I asked Billy to do a whole bunch of tasks on my behalf. Update CRM, create an email, create a proposal, do a number of things. Versus Zach was actually a combination of doing that as well as actually actively listening to a conversation and providing recommendation and guidance to me contextually based on a call that was occurring with a customer. Again, neither of those are better than the other, they're just different scenarios. So when we look at that, I think the opportunity that exists for your businesses is to say, well, so rather than Billy or Billy or Zach, what if we create a Scott? What is that Scott to us, right? What's the data that we have that's unique to our business that no other business has? And what questions would we want to ask it? What would we want Scott to do with that data on our behalf, right? That's the opportunity that exists. I feel so passionate about that. Like when I look at a company and when they figure out like a balance sheet for a business, I actually firmly believe that data deserves a spot as an asset on a balance sheet. And like any asset, that you have an opportunity to invest in that and to increase the value of that asset based on investments that you're going to make. So those assets, that data that you have, is what are you going to do to increase the value of that data to your business? That's the opportunity that exists. Pause again. Questions, comments, love to discuss. Okay, I'm gonna keep going, but I mean, we have a huge call. We've well over 20 folks here. So if you do have questions, please, I'd love to make sure that we get your stuff answered, although we will have a dedicated slot at the end of the session to ask any questions you may have. All right, so these Billy and Zach, I think, are very ambitious. Perhaps you can think of them as ambitious use cases, right? But what are people doing now, right? When we think about Gen AI, Copilot, or otherwise, what is it that people are doing for work, right? What are those use cases? And there's a ton. I'm not going to go into a gajillion examples, although I could maybe double click or expand on a couple of these. But for example, we had a sales and an operational use case there. But if we go further, like inside of sales, what else could we do? We could respond to RFPs, right? What if we could build a database of all of the RFPs that we responded to? And in that database, we also have all of the requests for proposals. We have the RFP and our bids, and maybe another category that says whether we won or that we lost. And what if that AI engine over time could say, hey, these are the criteria, or these are the things, the inputs that go into a winning RFP. And when you ask it to help build an RFP template for you, it's taking into account all of those things that you've done in the past to help you increase your success rate for responding to RFPs. We've got operations. Could be things like creating new offerings or creating product feedback here. Marketing, I think there's a million examples. This one's probably the most well understood because it's all about creating content, and that's one of the most earliest accepted use cases for Gen AI is content creation. So we probably don't need to dive into use cases here. But then, of course, if there's certain things that you'd like to know or hear about, happy to. You can get into things like finance. I've had customers say, hey, I do a lot of reconciliation for invoices to AR stubs or AP stubs or whatever. Could I have AI do a bunch of that reconciliation for me? Yes. The answer is absolutely yes. HR. What if we could take our employee handbook and all of our benefits and stuff like that and create a platform for our employees to ask, how many sick days do we have? How do I request vacation? I'm going to go work out of country. Are there things that I need to do to notify people in order for me to be able to work from England for a week? Whatever the case may be. Hey, I'm being bullied at work. What should I do? Who should I talk to? And when we think about from an HR perspective, especially for those scenarios where many people will feel uncomfortable talking to a person, if there's an AI bot or an agent that's been trained on your policies, it might create an opportunity for them to raise their hand and ask for help in a way that they feel more comfortable doing that. Right? And customer service, I just described an example before. Tons and tons of use cases. And again, these are really just scratching the surface. I threw these up just so that there's a few things that are a little bit more concrete, more specific, tied to different functional areas of the business, because it's not just sales, it's not just marketing, where AI can make an impact. All right. So we came here to talk about AI, right? But specifically AI as it relates to business strategy. And I think this is important. Let me just get my pen out. What I've observed is that often when we look at anything, especially like AI in particular, there's almost an appetite that there's an expectation that when we think of it from a time and a value perspective, on the access perspective, we're going to do some proof of concept or whatever the case may be, and we're going to go immediately to something that's incredibly high value, right? And I think that's probably not reasonable, not realistic. There's, I suspect, nothing else in your business where if you make a small investment or you do some proof of concept where you're going to immediately see a massive impact or a massive return on investment. That's not the way that new things work. You tend to have to go over time. And what I liken that to is the concept of home runs or base hits. So I'm not sure if anyone's seen the movie Moneyball. It's a movie with Brad Pitt. I enjoyed it. I don't remember how old it is. It's probably a few years old now. But the whole idea is that back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, in baseball anyways, everyone, the recipe for success for teams was that you wanted to get as many players that could hit as many home runs as possible. And they put a disproportionately high value to players that could hit home runs. And somebody, you can watch the movie to find out the whom, but there are people that say, hold on a second, is that actually accurate? Is it more important to get on base or to hit a home run? And what they found was statistically, it's actually getting on base that's the most important thing. And there's a stronger correlation to winning between getting on base than hitting a home run. And I like that analogy because I do think that's the same here. When we think about AI or any new investments, any innovation, things that are hard, things that are a stretch, things that we're not likely or used to doing as a business, we shouldn't have the expectation that we're going to hit a home run on our first swing, our first time up at bat. We should be thinking about how do we work our way up to that home run, right? What are those base hits that we can hit along the way? And so that our journey isn't this straight path that goes right up. It's probably something more gradual, right? And if we go along this path, maybe we can find opportunities to skip a step. I think we should be looking for those opportunities because I think they do exist. But again, we shouldn't be describing the success or failure of our initiative on whether we've hit the home run right out of the gate. So what does that mean? What are those use cases? Most people, it's been our experience when we think about AI, most people are going to be starting from a productivity perspective, whether that's Copilot or something else. And when I say productivity, it's probably something like one of those use cases I had on the last slide, where it's creating content, taking meeting minutes for a call, summarizing an email, helping you to catch up when you return from vacation to 500 emails that are in your inbox. Whatever the case may be, it's likely a productivity use case that you're going to start with. And that's for a number of reasons. Right? One, I do think it's the thing that is the least amount of barriers between that and some form of an ROI, even if that ROI isn't transformative, right? Because that value, if you look at the chart here, it's not high up on the value, but it's also quick on the time. It's a fast time to value from a productivity use case perspective. And once you've done that, once you've begun to build the muscle for innovation, especially around AI, we can then look at new use cases, right? Maybe that we're going to look at automation, right? So the scenarios I described before with Zach and Andrea, actually don't remember who, or Billy, Zach and Billy, Kendall Jenner and the Mr. Beast. Those scenarios are a little bit more complex because we've asked them to do a number of automation tasks for us. We've asked them to listen and help us and provide guidance or even be predictive in nature. So those are likely not the use cases that we're going to start with. We're going to start with productivity. Once we've done that, we're going to move to then something like automation. And then maybe it's something like insights. I have a lot of folks that, for example, want to bring up an Excel spreadsheet and use Copilot to ask questions to get to insights on a spreadsheet or on the file. And while there's potential there, again, I'm not sure that's the place we want to start because there's a lot of complexity, I suspect, in all of our businesses' data. And if we want to expect that we just can open up a spreadsheet, begin asking questions and get magic right away, that's going to transform our business or give us insights that we had never had before, again, probably not a reasonable expectation. We need to work our way up there, figure out if there are prerequisites in order for us to get to those outcomes that we're expecting for data, and it's likely not just turn on Copilot and off we go, right? There's probably work that needs to be done to do that. And eventually, we get to our home run. And our home run could be one of those use cases I described before, but I suspect it's something else. So I mentioned earlier how I feel that your data likely has or should deserve a spot on your balance sheet as an asset, right? And it's up to you to decide how much is that asset worth? Because again, we're playing with imaginary dollars here, but it's not nothing. And when we think about AI, especially the AI tools that are being provided by vendors, Copilot, for an example, you can just go buy that, but so can your competitors. And therefore, is Copilot really going to provide you competitive advantage? Is it going to allow you to disrupt the market? Probably not. It might. For those early adopters, those people that are ahead of the curve, it will likely give you a head start. But again, there will be a rapid catch up, and it's not going to be what creates differentiation. What creates differentiation is going to be your data, the stuff that no one else has access to. It doesn't exist on the internet, whether it's customer information, proprietary data, whatever that case may be. It's your information that's going to allow you to be different or unique because none of your competitors will have access to it. And it's those companies that figure out a way to activate that data that are going to get to that home run. And that home run, therefore, is going to be different for every business. But we should recognize that we shouldn't be aiming here to start unreasonable, likely unreasonable. And we need to understand that there were probably steps on this journey, and we should look for opportunities to accelerate our time to get to that home run. But let's not start with our hardest, most complex, most ambitious use case first. Let's start with a reasonable, low risk, low complexity use case so that we can build a muscle and begin to work towards that home run scenario that's being described there. I'm going to pause again and see if there's any questions for this slide. I do get the question sometimes over build or buy, for example, and insert software vendor here. Everyone is building an AI solution. So should I just go buy that? Is my home run going to be buying the solution, or do I need to build something, or is it a hybrid? I think generally speaking, you should buy when the outcome or the success of it is relying on only a single system. But if you go back to our analogy of the house, we've got multiple rooms together. There's likely not a number of systems that traverse every single room. And therefore, you're probably not going to have something that you can buy that's going to do everything, right? Or you're going to buy individual unique solutions for all of them. But again, if we look at our home run, it's likely going to have data that sits in your CRM, data that sits in your accounting package, data that sits in your operation system. And so it's going to be a combination of the two. You're likely into some form of a hybrid long-term. Again, immediately, we would say just buy something, buy Copilot, buy the solutions that software vendors are making. Let's not start with building something as our first initiative. But yeah, the home run might be a combination of taking something that you buy and adding to it, expanding on it. The second thing that's relevant for this diagram or this analogy, and I get this a lot, I see many companies, specifically with Copilot, want to buy 5 or 10 licenses. And who do those licenses go to? Often, my experience has been, it goes to executives. It goes to the leadership team. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. And the reason I think that's fundamentally wrong is AI, when we think of all those use cases, if we go back to this diagram here, or these examples here, they're all about doing work. And I don't mean like doing work, but like actually executing a task and working with data. These tasks largely deal with content creation, not content consumption. And so when we give Copilot licenses, for example, they should go to people that are in jobs or perform roles that are heavy into content creation, not to leaders or executive who are primarily content consumers. I think of the ideal use case or the ideal audience for AI, at least where it sits today, is frontline knowledge workers. It's all of the individual contributors at your business that actually help you be successful, that sit at a desk and perform tasks. Those are the ones that are likely going to help you see success with AI in the near term, as you work towards the home run scenarios. Okay, so if we understand this and we say, okay, what do I do here? What are the steps that I should be taking? How do I get going on this journey? For productivity, as an example, what are the steps that I can take? We feel like you need to have some form of a starter kit, something to get you going. And that has a number of ingredients, or should have a number of ingredients, to help you be successful. And so I'm going to share an offering with you, not as a solicitation, although obviously we'd love the opportunity to work with you if you think that's helpful. But I want you to look at this next slide and understand the ingredients that we're describing, so that should you choose to do this internally in your business, you're able to take those things and say, oh, okay, these are the things that I should be thinking about to go if I want to try and execute this on my own. Again, we'd love the opportunity to work with you. We get a lot of joy and pleasure from helping other people be successful, but understanding that that's not always going to be the case for everybody. So the lens to look through the next slide is, what are those ingredients that we need to be thinking about to get to success for our starter kit or our productivity or AI journey? So we have this offering, and we think there are 4 main criteria to be successful with getting a proof of concept going for Copilot or some initial AI offering. Number 1, we feel that you need to have user-centric champion empowerment. And for us anyways, we follow ProSci as a change management methodology. And it's all about thinking through who are those people that are going to evangelize this technology that we're bringing forward, right? And how do we measure that success? Are they going to actually use the technology that we're doing? Are they excited by it, right? Can they help us understand what are the concerns that the naysayers may have in our business? And can they help us prepare for what those naysayers may have, so that when we eventually look to expand this into the rest of the business, that they can both advocate for and help us mitigate the risk of the naysayers, right? So that user-centric champion empowerment is so important. The second piece or ingredient of the recipe that we feel is executive buy-in. So while I described that AI is at least today, a frontline knowledge worker use case, it's for the actual individual contributors in the business that are doing work. They're the ones that are going to see the highest value, highest return from an investment in AI. The business still needs to buy into it because it's going to take an investment to do it. And in order to get the executive team not just buying in, but aligned, right? What does success look like? Do we understand what our home run opportunities are in the business? Have we even thought about what our home run opportunities are? We need to build a roadmap, right? And I don't mean some massive, crazy artifact that's obsolete the minute you build it. 5 or 6 page artifact or less that describes, here's what success looks like for us, and here are the next few steps that we're going to take intentionally to get to the outcome or to get to that described success. And that the executive team or the leadership team needs to be bought into that journey. The third thing is the timeline. Again, I drew that diagram of time to value. We shouldn't be expecting the champion group or anybody that once we give them the tool, that within a week they're up and running and they're using it and they're singing us praises. Change is hard. Telling people to give them a new way to do things that they've been used to doing for years, decades even, is harder. So we need to give time for this to be successful. We need to set reasonable expectations for when we can. And hold on. Yeah, and so we just need to make sure that we've got reasonable time, reasonable expectations for when the value is going to be. We feel that 2 or 3 months, again, depending on the timing, is a good amount of time for us to get it in place, make sure the rigor is taken, that your proof of concept is going, and that you're accounting for time to learn and execute and begin to use the tools, right? But 2 months, the champions are adopting it, and that you're using data to track it, probably by behaviors, right? They're using Copilot or AI once a day, once every other day, again, whatever the success metric is that you're defining. Finally, security and data review, right? With great power comes great responsibility. We do want to make sure that there's understanding of, is your data ready for AI, right? Are there any risks that you as a business should be thinking about or considering before releasing this beyond your group of champions, for example? And are there steps that you need to do to mitigate if there are any risks? What are those types of things that you need to action in order to close that gap so you can feel comfortable bringing it to the rest of your business? So those are the 4 ingredients that we feel are important to do a proof of concept or to get going with this. Following a methodology to get your champions empowered, making sure there's executive alignment, tracking and measuring success using data to see how adoption is going, and making sure that your data and security are in a place that they're adequate to support your business. If this is of use, you'd love to again, we'd love to chat with you about this. We do have this offer for small businesses. You can see the price there. And for larger organizations, we have this similar methodology, but of course the pricing would be a little bit more bespoke depending on the needs of your business. So with that, I would love to get to questions. So we've had 50 minutes of me talking. I usually actually try to keep it much slower, less than that. But if there are any questions, feel free to either come off mute, ask your questions. You can raise your hand. I can call you by name, or feel free again to just type them into the chat window and we will get to them and I'll answer them as they come up. All right, so first one's training and adoption. I'll try and do this ad lib and treat these as ad hoc questions, but how do I create better training for business adoption? I do think training is one aspect of it. I think most people think of adoption or change management as training, and that's not, it's more than that, right? There needs to be a communication plan. There needs to be success criteria. How do we measure and track progress? If the progress is not meeting expectations, what do you do to pivot our plan to meet the success? So while training is one important ingredient in the recipe for success, it's not the only one. So how do I create a better one? I think it's following, to us anyways, it's following a change management methodology, which includes more than just training. And whether you want to follow ProSci or some other method, I think that's great. There's lots of free content from Microsoft. If you go to, I think it's adoption.microsoft.com, there's tons of blueprints and templates that you can use to begin your journey. How to best test Copilot with only a few licenses. That's an it depends. It's the ultimate consultant answer, right? But to me, test has to have a result that you're trying to achieve. So what is it that you're trying to, like, how do you measure success? And to test it, your tests need to be aligned to whatever your success metrics are. So if you are trying to have Copilot, for example, summarize meeting minutes and capture action items, right? Your test is probably use it. Anyone that's a part of your pilot, they have to agree that they're going to use it all the time, provide feedback, and share with the other early adopters what that's worked and what hasn't worked. And it's only with that shared repository where you're going to figure out things like prompts. Like you need to build a prompt library. So these are the prompts that are effective for my business, and hey, try it like this, or maybe we should word our prompt differently like that. It's getting into that shared understanding that's going to lead to success. AI capabilities and usage. How can AI automate routine IT tasks to increase efficiency and reduce workload for IT admins? It's another it depends. And I would probably suggest this isn't the place to start. And the reason I say that is because this isn't content creation. This is into automation, and it's really going to depend on what type of tasks you're trying to automate. I gave a couple of examples for things like ticket handling or incident management. I think those are very clearly opportunities to get some efficiencies as it relates to IT tasks. It could even be things like self-help, right? We've become accustomed to Googling. What if instead of Googling for IT help or support issues, what if we asked an IT agent, a bot that's been trained on your applications that knows how to support whatever tools that you use inside your business? I think those are some ways to get to not just added value, but having your users feel the ability or have the ability to self-help. I think that often is what many of us like to do or enjoy to do. How can AI predict and prevent hardware failures or system outages by analyzing performance data? I think this already does this to a large extent. There are a lot of, so let's take Azure as an example. There are a lot of thresholds, automation alerts that you can create. But beyond that, where we get into AI, it's, I think, more in the diagnosis piece, right? Hey, this server is not working, or I had this authentication issue. What should be my next 3 steps to try and solve this, right? I think those are the areas where we're going to see more value again in the short term for AI as it relates to more IT side of stuff. In what ways can AI-driven insights help IT admins optimize network performance? Okay, so again, fairly technical question. So I'm going to elevate it a little bit, I think, and maybe not just IT admins, but just in general. Actually, it's very similar to the previous one where we talk about setting thresholds, and I think it's more about asking AI to help you solve questions. So it's, hey, this is what I'm observing. What should be my course of action? Or, hey, I'm seeing this error message. What does this mean? Give it to me in plain English. And I think that plain English explanation for IT issues or IT error screens is something where you can get into, again, real immediate value. Security and data management. What are the best practices for implementation, security practices, and adoption? Hopefully I shared a bunch of them in this session. If there are things that we didn't cover, or if you'd love to dive into deeper, let me know. But let's say security is one that I didn't really talk about, right? One of the most common ones is there's two risks, if you want to call it that. And it's not just related to AI, but just in general, right? One would be based off of the identity of the person asking the question. So if not that we need more examples of this, but every business should be taking identity security seriously. If you don't have MFA, for example, in your business, that should be like a day one, do it tomorrow. It's so important. It just needs to be in place. That's not enough, but that should be at least a place to start. And there are other things that you'd want to layer on to from an identity perspective to make sure that that's protected. But then when we pivot to data, right, the files, one of the risks can be overexposure to data. So there's this concept called security by obscurity. So we all probably have file shares in our business. And over the years, those accumulate thousands of files, and you've got hundreds of folders, tons of layers deep. And what if you've got some spreadsheet that has sensitive data 7 layers deep on a file that nobody knows where to get to, and it's just obscure? So it's open, people can get to it, but nobody knows that it's even there, and nobody's actually going to go and try and find it. And so it's secure because it's so hard to find, or it's secure because it's obscure. But what AI does is it reduces that obscurity thing. It makes it much easier to just ask questions. And so we do want to make sure that the data that people have access to is the appropriate amount of data. And there are tools that you can use to help you identify where there may be overexposed data or overexposed files that are shared in a way that you might not want them to be shared. So those are some of the things to think about when you think about security and or data. When pulling data into Copilot from SharePoint or another shared environment, is there a way to prevent it from being saved on personal OneDrives or accounts? I think this is less a Copilot question or less an AI question and more like general security IT governance. If the person that asked this question is still in line, they want to provide me a bit more context. But I think for this audience, I would say for the person that asked this, maybe reach out and I'd be happy to answer that kind of in a more on one capacity because it feels more general security than specific. How to ensure data privacy and security when using AI and Copilot. Again, I spoke to a little bit before. There are tools out there to help you identify either overexposed data, or the other thing is overprivileged users. So users that have more access than they should, or data that is more exposed than it should. Those are your two risks, and those are the two things that you want to look at when you're looking to expand Copilot beyond, let's say, a pilot group or an initial proof of concept. So a lot of questions there. Actually, that was, for everyone here, that was a bit unscripted. So those are ad hoc answers to those questions. I hadn't actually seen those before. So I appreciate that folks took up the time to fill out the survey and ask the questions. And again, if there are any other questions that folks have, I do want to make sure that as you're leaving this session, you got what you, the individual, were looking for out of this, and that if you have any remaining questions that you have that are specific to your business, please feel free to ask, because I suspect that other people might have a similar question or variation of it.